learning. Okay, so Mark, let's start with you. And we kind of went over this before this meeting of how we were going to approach this. And so Mark is going to go into his, you're going to use your SmugMug account, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, and just for those of you that don't know, this is, you're used to working with us with Real Scout, but this is a system called SmugMug that a lot of location scouts and managers use. And so I wanted him to walk through some sample locations and how he shot them. So Mark, take it away.
So SmugMug, I've used it for about 8 years now, or 10 years. It's about $80 a year. It's unlimited. And it's just very easy to use. Just pull and drop photos or drop folders in there. And basically all these are different projects I've worked on it, and they have, each of them has, 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 files on them. So I'm set one up for our show today for Camera Ready, and we're just going to walk through. We're going to look at houses, towns, roads, factories, rivers and woods, and offices, just kind of how we shoot them and what we're thinking when we're out scouting, and how we can share that information. So the Avon house was actually the house that Tyler Perry used in a bunch of his movies, for his Medea movies. And so when we come to a house, or I feel the best way to do it is start on the outside. We want to photograph the outside a bit and walk right up to the front porch, turn around, do a reverse, walk in the door, and shoot the public spaces. We don't always need to go upstairs. We mostly film in the public spaces unless they're asking for a master bedroom or a child's room or something like that. So I'm just going to walk. These are about, I have many more images than this, but if you were going to send us images, 15 to 20 is pretty good. You might want to shoot 50 images to get that 15 or 20, but for that initial look, we only need about, like I said, about 15 or 20 or maybe 25. So we started across the street. Now we have a little raking angle. Here we're approaching the house. Got a little reverse. Another reverse. Idea of what the porch looks like. And then we walk into the front room. If you notice, my back is in the corner. That way I get the widest shot of the house or the room. We don't really need sideboards and stuff or too much detail, but we just need the widest angle that you can give us. That works best for us. This is a pretty wonderful house. We love the big doorways. We love big windows because light, we can bring light through the windows. It warms up the house very nicely. The hallway shot, reverse. Dining room. See how nice those windows are? And digital cameras love low light. So even, I think if you guys have a camera, great. If you don't, iPhones are perfectly good for this. Once again, notice my back's on a wall. Little shot of the backyard. And when we go upstairs, I like to photograph the stairs that symbolizes or notice, or hopefully the audience will notice that you're moving upstairs, or you're upstairs hallway and a bedroom. These are all good sized rooms. So let me click off here, sorry. We'll go to our next house and we'll walk through our second house. Basically the same idea. Start with a a good exterior establishing shot. We've shot this house on numerous shows. It's a very nice kind of working class home. Let me see a little bit what the neighborhood looks like. A reverse from the front porch, and we're into the front door. From the front door, we look at some of the public rooms. You see the doorways we like, the windows we like. Once again, my back's at the back of in the corner. Now we're just walking through the house. Give us if you can, a couple angles on each room. Try to include the windows. The windows are important to us. Get an angle with the windows in it. And that's about 25 pictures, 20 to 25 pictures on both of those locations. And that gives you a pretty good idea of what those houses look like. And I'm just going to show the two houses. I'm going to go on to towns and stuff and talk about towns a little bit. Basically, when we reach out to outside of Atlanta, outside of the zone, as we call it, we don't think we can find what we like in the zone. And many times we're looking for a certain town, looking at a town or whatever. So, and if we find a town we like, then we'll come and find other locations that work with it. We may start just with the downtown stuff and then go to farms or factories or fields or whatever, rivers, whatever it might be. But usually we're looking for a main location or important location for us once we get out into greater Georgia. So I'm just going to start with Conyers. What I'm doing here is basically raking angles, kind of looking down the street. This is where I've taken two pictures together and stitched them together. And the program I use for that is it's called Double Take. And all you do is just drag your pictures and drop them. And basically, if you're going to do a pan, if you're going to use Double Take or something similar, it's a lot of different stitching programs. We just want two pans. We don't want four because the image gets too small to see when you put it on screen. So if you have like a two picture pan, that works great for us. A larger pan than that is difficult to see the information on it. So that's called Double Tap. It's very easy to use, and there's many other different stitching programs. All right, so I'm going to keep panning here with another stitched. So I stitched it right there in the middle there. This one looks a little odd, but I'm just walking down the street showing the storefronts. It's a pretty dead little part of town, which is good for us. It's less expensive. We don't have to buy so many businesses out and redress them and things like that. So I think that's about 25 images there.
And if you Mark,
yeah.
If you are shooting with an iPhone, you can still do a pan, by moving the phone side to side. But like you said, you do have to be cautious about making too large of a pan because the picture starts getting thin and you can't really pick up much detail.
That's right. And the angles get warped too if you do too long a pan using your iPhone. Just do maybe a quarter of the iPhone pan, and I think that would be about right.
Yeah, and whether we're looking at single shots and we're also looking at pans, but it is generally important to keep in mind to shoot wide no matter what.
That's right.
Because we do get sometimes photos submitted to us of town streets that it's just a tight shot and we can't see much detail, and we'd rather see a wider shot so we know. Really, the goal is to show the DP or whoever what they're going to be dealing with if they put the camera at this, like on this particular street. what they're going to see around them. And this may be something we talk about during the presentation, but we kind of want to show certain angles, warts and all, to show if there are any potential obstacles or things that the production's going to have to work around to get their shot.
All right, just one more town. All right, Covington is a very picturesque town. So it's actually a lovely town. And these are all just basically singles showing how the storefronts that are there. A few little wider shots. So when you look at these images, it doesn't really show all of what the town is. I should have had a few more pans in here and show the park and things like that. It still gives you the feeling of the town, its socioeconomic, level. And this is just one of the few pans I had in my file. So what happens if you get back to your office and you go, oh God, I missed something? Oh, well, before I say that, it's also nice maybe to drop a little map in. So if you hadn't seen Covington before, you really wouldn't know it's a square and how it's set up. But if you go to a Google map and just do a little screen grab, then you can give the company or me and the production company an idea of how the town's laid out, how that square is laid out. So as I was saying, I didn't shoot very many pans. I didn't really show that. So which happens, and when you get back to the office and you realize that, you can go to Google Maps and take your little guy that walks around and drop him in the square there. And you can, that way if you're short if you feel you're short and you're not conveying the information you would like, I've gotten to where I use Google Maps a lot, especially on roads and stuff like that. You move, you can find the angle you want and show them the park, etc. So that's a nice fallback, and Google Maps are great.
It's also good to show if the photos are relatively old, a quick way to show what it probably looks like right now, yeah, or close to it, if you can't get out and reshoot it if you're in a hurry.
And it has these buttons down at the bottom right, zoom. And you can even zoom out. So you can get a little more image if you need. But I think that's a great thing as far as location scouting now is Google Maps makes it a little more forgiving. All right. So those are two pretty good sized towns, but we also have a lot of requests for drier towns, older towns, a little more historic. And this is a little town right inside of Atlanta called Rex, but unfortunately, which is a great look, unfortunately it's right under the Hartsfield flight pattern. So you really can't do any dialogue here. It's a great looking town, same little deal. Shoot. If you can stitch is much better than a single shot, but just keep it wide so we can see what's going on. And once again, this would be a great place to shoot because there's not too much economic activity there. We can create that.
And Mark, do you, like you were talking about the flight path and other things that may be challenging at this location, do you put a note with the file so your clients know that in advance? If
there's some type of large construction project going on where they're building a Safeway or a Walmart, a half a block away, we'd want to know that. It would be bad for us to travel 2 or 3 hours to a location and then find out that sound-wise, sound's tough because sound's 360, whereas you can look one way and it looks great, but you can hear 360. So if there is some type of large project going on, we would like to know that. Maybe take a couple of snapshots of that and include it in the file, and possibly a note if that's possible.
Yeah, and our camera ready folks can put that in the in Real Scout under site condition, and just kind of give us advance warning that hey, it's a noisy place, it's got an active train line, whatever it might be, so we know in advance.
The town has great character, the bridge and the little waterfall and stuff. It's a fabulous town, but I've never been able to shoot it. So.
Oh, there's a highway right there. I mean,
yeah, it's the plane traffic what kills you, though.
Yeah.
All right.
But that's a good example, Mark. I hate to interrupt you, but can you go back to that shot with the bridge, with the highway bridge?
Yeah.
That's.
It's not really a highway. Oh, this one.
Well, no, on the right. Isn't that no, not there. No, go down that one. No, go down or up. I can't think. All right, that's good.
That's more so. Well, that's just like a city to town road. It's not too bad. But of course, if there's a freeway there, we don't want to shoot right beside a freeway.
Well, there's that, and then also, I guess, why I brought it up was that if a project that's maybe using Rex for a period film that wouldn't have obviously that road built or that warehouse that's sort of in between. That's a good example of showing the DP or the director that, hey, this is what you may have to work around if you shoot here visually, if it's a early 1900s movie or something like that.
Right. And even if, let's say we're doing a 1960s piece and you got a 2000 period bank in there, we can work around that many times. Don't say, oh, well, it's got that one property that's not 1960 or 1970s. It's actually 2000. We can work around that. We can digitally dress it, or we can just shoot around it. So if the town's right or close, don't worry if there's one or two things that don't work. We'd much prefer to see the images and go from there. And the other thing I'd like to say is when we reach out to Georgia, we're thinking that what we're looking for is not in the Atlanta area. So, but the deal is when we look, we need to get fairly quick responses because daily our concept changes. So, but if you can hook us quickly, then we stay on that concept. But if you're 3 or 4 days later, we've rethought what we're doing. So it's not quite the quicker you can get us information back, the better chance we have of picking that location. Just because so many people are involved in such a creative.
That's a great point. I'd like to speak to that, coming from South Georgia, which really moves at a different pace in Atlanta. There's this convention here that businesses or people don't call you back in the same day. And it's maddening when you're working on the timetable that Mark's talking about. And I know it's, it is what it is. It is how things work, the pace of the South, but it can be maddening to folks who are trying to make decisions like really quickly. So that idea of timeliness, I don't know that we could stress that enough. It's a different world, this world of production, and the pace that it moves. And it used to be, people weren't expecting pictures till the next day, FedEx or whatever. But now, there's no reason why you couldn't get out with your iPhone and have something to somebody pretty quickly. That's all I'll say.
Okay. All right. So that was towns. Roads. So anything that's pretty cool looking, any kind of anomaly, or this is up towards Cartersville, is a big coal plant up there, coal-fired power plant. And it's been in quite a few films.
Excuse me,
big
Mark,
movie.
Joe Martin here. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you talk about getting the pictures to them quickly, how do you package them? Do you give them a URL to the Camera Ready site, or do you package them in 15 PDFs, quick thumbnails, or how do you do this quickly? You take them on your iPhone.
I don't mind getting an email, with 15 or so medium-sized images in them. I prefer not to have giant, 10 megabytes images. But if you're using Apple Mail, then or whatever the mail is anyway. But that's the best way to get them to me. Then I can get them on my site and present them, you know, in a manner that I think they might work. But at the same time, you should certainly post them to camera ready too.
Yeah, anything that has a use for this Mark's particular project or any others in the future. I mean, it's obviously best to have it in Real Scout. So even if it doesn't work for this project, we have it for something else, can send it quickly. I will say, you know, getting back to the Google Maps thing, I had a project, y'all got an email about it, but I was recently, before all this COVID stuff hit, looking for a motel that was kind of like the Bates Motel, and sat out in a kind of a rural area, and they wanted this information really quick. So I used Google Maps a lot at that point, because they said, yeah, we got one outside of town. I can't shoot it right now, but here's the owner's name and here's where it is. And I was able to go to Google Maps and do what Mark just showed you a few minutes ago and kind of show how it sits and what's around it. And, you know, it's kind of a temporary thing you can do before we get real images, you know, to get this information to them quickly. Because we always preach, like Mark said, that our clients want this information fast, including photos, and they'll look somewhere else if they don't hear back within a few days.
Oh, I did that. But it's a great road. It could be anywhere in the U.S. It could be out west. And Craig mentioned about looking for things that don't exactly look like Georgia that could play in other parts of the country. They had a big action car chase blow up here on maybe one of that Fast Fives or whatever. I can't remember what show it was. But that could be anywhere in America. I mean, that could be almost in Kansas. And it's so graphic with the power lines and stuff. It's a great location. All right. And even at the, this is the approach to it. The approach is nice. Just that what we like in roads are things that go up and down. They can come down a hill, up a hill, because it kind of fills the screen. It's, as you can see, you have the power lines working on the left side of frame and that nice tree, etc. So, and that doesn't look like anything like the power line portion of it. But just another example of what makes a road interesting. I got a few more.
And that particular road looks like it could be in Connecticut or something like that. That's a good example of collecting locations that could be set in different parts of the world.
Here's, once again, these are stitched, but it just shows you, this is south of Atlanta. Luella is kind of north of Griffin there, a few miles. And I included some of this architecture that's fabulous. It sits out in the middle of a field. Once again, curvy roads. We like a curvy road.
And crops.
Yeah, we do. There aren't many. There aren't many. Shot this farm several times. All right.
And that's something that we do this a lot too. If we're out shooting multiple road locations, and by the time you finish and you get back and start putting them all together, you can't remember where you were. I always try to include a shot of a road sign like that. So it's like, okay, sure, this is Luella Road, or this is, you know, just for yourselves, so you remember what it is you shot and where it is.
A couple more roads to chat up. As I said, we like curvy roads. So here's a nice S-turn. Oh, sorry about that. I'll do it. Once again, this is basically a two picture stitch. Curvy road. This is Red Top Mountain State Park. It's a big long curve. And also at the park, it has this fabulous bridge, which has been in quite a few movies. So, and it's very graphic. You know, it's a wonderful location. Once again, here's that curve. We love that car driving past us, going down the curve. It gives us some motion, and that kind of stuff's very exciting to us. Also up near Red Top Mountain is this 4-lane, but looks like interstate. It's, I think it's Georgia 1000. It was just a connector they built up there. Once again, we can control this. We can close it down. We like that curve. It gives us some action. Cars coming, cop cars blowing past us, cop cars coming to us. You know, that's a great look, you know, so, you know, this could be wide open. It doesn't have to be mountainous or anything. It could be wide open too. If you have a road that goes under a bridge, it's all the same piece of road. So now we could cut from up top to down here and have the cop cars blowing by. So we have 2 or 3 different looks right there in the same location. And what I do sometimes, not all the time, especially when I'm outside the city, is I'll drop a map in, take a little screenshot of Google, put a pin in it, and then do a little screenshot and include it in the pictures. That way I know where we are. And also where we might be and how close we are to your city or town. What else I have? But this, once again, just another example of Google Map. I was looking for, trying to think of the name of the city in Los Angeles, support there. And these are all Google Map images. They're great. Now I was at the office. I had a presentation coming up, and instead of going out and shooting it, you know, myself, I just grabbed some Google images that I could present and see if that's the direction they wanted to go. You know, those are great images. All righty. Like, once again, wide's better than tight. It's better to shoot in the horizontal, not so much the vertical. You know, as you see, most of my images are horizontal.
Yeah, that's a good point. As you know, movies are projected horizontally, and television, it's very rare that you would shoot a vertical, maybe something like a waterfall or a tall building, but it's great seeing the pans.
And let's say we're looking for a small town, and you send us your images of your downtown or town, or et cetera, but you guys have something pretty cool, like an old plant that's got great windows or has some history to it or whatever. You might want to just throw those in there, you know, because instead of doing everything downtown, we might bring something to that facility or drive by, or, you know, have a scene in the parking lot. But it's got to be pretty cool. If we're not asking for that, it needs to be pretty cool. But if you have it, you might want to include it in your images. This was, where's this? This is in Noonan. I think the Walking Dead shot here, and maybe Hunger Games. But what's so great are these windows. Once again, windows. Photographers love windows because they can control the light and gives the image life. So if you have any kind of old warehouse or whatever, or something like that, whether it's in service or not, and it has some interest and some scale, you know, we may just go right past it, but we'd certainly like to see it. All right. These are factories, different kind of factories that you might find in smaller town, Georgia. It's a great old 1950s, 60s business that's still in operation. You know, that's all great character. It's fabulous character. Great textures. It just doesn't get any better than that. All right, so we'll just keep moving through these pretty quickly. Georgia Power is very open to us filming at their properties. So if you guys have some large power plants down there, or even some nice, either a dam or some power stations, et cetera, if we're looking for factories and stuff, Georgia Power is open to us being there. So if you go and shoot some images, you should save all your images and files, because you're going to be asked for the same thing, several times a year. And if you already have those files shot, then you can easily package them and get them to us. This is a water plant in Atlanta. And underground, it has these great tunnels, the huge tunnels and stuff. But all this graphic piping and stuff, that's fabulous. I mean, that's forced perspective looking down that runway, that walkway is great. So just something to think about what may be in your area that's kind of interesting looking and has some nice angles and has some character. What also you might have in your communities is a new warehouse or a new manufacturer. This is down in McDonough. It's a Sony Sandy where they make tractors, where they actually assemble tractors, I guess from China. But it's been in a ton of big movies. They've been in so many movies, they got so expensive, you can't hardly afford them anymore. But it's a brand new modern facility, which could certainly be sitting out in one of your counties.
Yeah, Marvel loves locations like that.
Yeah, and Marvel will certainly come south, north, west, east to find something like this.
That's nice.
Yep. All right. And Marvel has a lot of money to spend. Yeah. Is that anything else over there? Yeah. And also too, just this little pop shop, a mom and pop gas station. That's fabulous. Good country character. And it doesn't have to be a gas station. It could be an antique place or, whatever that might be in your community. It's something that's got character. So we're out to River and Woods. So this is the approach to that, to this old mill, Sweetwater Mill. And I pulled this off of Google Maps. They have images on Google Maps. And I've gotten to where I check those images because sometimes something like this is there. It's not just someone, photographing a plate, a dinner plate or something like that. It actually has some, but once again, anything that's got character, got a little scale to it.
Now, Mark, these images that we've been looking at, are a lot of these, were they shot, did you receive instructions from the folks you were working for on angles that they wanted to see, or are these just general?
Not so much. They want to see, you might get specific occasionally, but mostly they just want to see what's there. And then if they see something they like, then we'll go out and check angles and such like that. But and try to make a day out of it or a week out of it or whatever it might be. But when I'm scouting, I'm giving them wides. We're back to our wheat field again. Once again, just showing, just trying to get pretty pictures.
And where was this, Mark?
That was Luella Road. That was Luella Road.
Oh, still there. And
Yeah.
Where's that again?
That's north of Griffin in Luella, Georgia.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
And once again, Craig had mentioned shooting things that don't look like Georgia, that could play somewhere else in the world. And we did a picture a World War II picture with Japanese soldiers. This was a Filipino. We created a Filipino fishing village on stilts. So he came in here and built those little huts and shacks along this river, and that could certainly be the Philippines or Vietnam or whatever. So And we shot it, we did shoot it in the summertime. It was nice and green for that, but nevertheless. Just giving you an idea of, I believe, sometimes we look for deserts, which are not particularly in Georgia, but isn't there some kind of Kalo plant or something south of Columbus down there, Craig? What kind of plant is that?
You said kaolin?
It's something that just has like white silt almost.
Like Sandersville, the middle of the state.
The kaolin, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, we send those for deserts and for other planets, especially closed ones that have that weird, the water's still sitting there and it's multicolored. It looks kind of bizarre.
Jefferson County as well, Louisville, Georgia, Rennes, Georgia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a cave that we found north of Cartersville in Cement, Georgia. Now, two reasons I'm showing this is that if you do have an anomaly of some sort, it doesn't have to be woods or rivers, except whatever it might be. It could be any kind of anomaly, great factory, whatever. But with this cave, you really can't tell the size of it. And you'll see that in just a second. So if you do have a second person with you, or if you have a tripod, which might be a bit much to ask, then you go stand in the picture so we can get scale. How big is this cave? You can't tell how big that cave is. From an image, you can't tell. It's like a waterfall. You can't tell a waterfall how tall they are. But this cave is huge. Cave is huge. So I had a tripod, put it on timer, and ran down there and put my flashlight on my iPhone on me so I would show in the image and give scale. By having someone in the image, it'll give the image scale, and that's sometimes important. All right. Once again, I'm doing this to just show you. That was my daughter when she was whatever. So if they weren't in the image, you could not tell how big that waterfall was. You just can't, by looking at a photograph, whether that waterfall's 12 feet tall or whether it's 40 or 50 feet tall. So, but you have someone in it, something that'll give it scale, whatever it might be. Maybe it's just an igloo ice chest or something, but that'll just give the image scale. All right. Getting pretty close to the end of my show and tell. And I just grabbed Rock City here once again to say these images all came off of probably Google Map. I wasn't going to send somebody up there and shoot this, but I wanted to show it was available for whatever project it was. I just went and grabbed some images quickly and put them up on my site so they could, if we like anything here, we can send somebody. But that might be it. Oh, offices. So, this first image, or first location, I'm going to show the difference between shooting a stitched image, like two stitched images, or just a single. So here we go. Same thing. You start outside, walk through the doors. So there's a single image. That's pretty good as you walk through the door. But then I'm stitching two images here. And it gives you a better idea of the scale of the shot. How deep it is, how much crapola is there. I'm just going to click through these pretty quickly. I came outside and did a couple of more stitched images. But when you do the singles, you really don't get the depth of the store, how large it is. The images are good. I mean, if I got these, I'd be very happy because I know what kind of store it is. I wouldn't know exactly how big it is, but it's still a great store, and I'd be happy to get these. Okay, kind of back to offices again. When we look for offices, we look once again for windows. This is one of my favorite offices in Atlanta. It's a great office. It has these interior windows, which is fantastic for somebody to walk down a hallway. It could even be a hallway with glass doors or something that's just, we're not closed in, that we have some natural light or artificial light falling onto our scene and into our set. Once a large office, once again, we can put cubicles in there, desk, whatever. That's all great.
And that could be multiple things. That could be the DMV. It could be the FBI, police headquarters.
Yeah,
that's multi-use right there.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to get to real quick is bathrooms. You know, if you got a good location that may work for us and it's got a good bathroom, we might want to see that, because bathrooms are hard to come by, especially with something a little period to it, a little age to it.
There are plenty of bathroom scenes.
Just do a little diner in there. Most towns have some great diners. Once again, exterior too. And then my back's basically against the wall, you know, looking at the diner here. Such great character. Nice windows.
That's another location that's used all the time, that silver skillet.
Yeah. I think it's going to be the last one. The Bank of America here is a giant, it's a big city bank, but I put these images in here just to show that if you have something that's historical, it's got has scale and some beauty to it, you should have those in your file, in your files, because somebody will want to shoot it. And if they are looking for period offices and or just offices in general, a good thing to think about are colleges, because colleges are anywhere from 60 to 120 years old. So they'll have a variety of looks on campus that may work for what your client's looking for. So I would just think about that. If you say, oh, I need an office and they don't like this and don't like that, colleges are sometimes a great resource. I just want to go back to houses and show you two files, and then I'll be done. On the Billy Bob movie, they use a plantation home. It's supposed to be in Alabama. And we looked all over and found it, some little town south of Columbus down there. And it's a great house that we wanted to drive up, et cetera, et cetera. And it took us a long time to find this house. It has the oak line drive on the house, the overhead shot, so you can see how it lines up, the approach, the driveway, you know, a little bit of the detail. And here we come to the house through the oaks. You know, I've overshot this because we used it, so you wouldn't have to include this many images. I just wanted to show you when we go inside. As we're walking up to the front door, looking out the front door, and we're into the house. And this house was too opulent. It was a beautiful house. Those rugs on the floor were $90,000 rugs. He had 4 of them. And I didn't think we should shoot inside.
Yeah, I'd be nervous every day shooting there.
Anyway, you can see how opulent the house is. So it was too nice. We're supposed to be at a home, plantation home in Alabama, like in the 60s. So what do? You know, we got to find an interior. And we found what was previously a funeral home. It was actually someone's home, I believe, at one time. But we matched that exterior with this house's interior. And it's much more Alabama-esque. It's not as pretty as the other house. And also it's big. I mean, this was a very generous sized house. And once again, my back's at the wall. I put my back at the wall. And we just, as we walk through, we walk I'm just going to walk through the house. But I just wanted to show you how sometimes you can match an exterior to an interior, and they're not the same property. They're really not the same period, but you can make that work. So, and that is the end of my lecture.
Hey, it's Cordelia. I have a question.
Okay.
Since
Hey,
a lot of
Cordelia.
filming, hi. Since a lot of filming does take place, you know, City of Atlanta, I like when you showed the Bank of America location. And then I also know Craig said that under Real Scout, we could put notes under the site conditions. So if you had that on Real Scout, will you guys have notes in there in regards to parking or how sensitive the area is or moratorium, so that even when you have your directors and everybody looking at it, they would get the whole gist of filming at that location?
Normally, I don't know if Craig and them can keep up with that. Now, they may be able to say Broad Street downtown is just shot all the time and you're going into a hornet's nest, you know, get ready to get your wallet out. But that would be the location manager's responsibility to see if the location's available, you know, to check that out. If there's someone from out of town, there's an out of town manager, they may get themselves in a bit of a pickle. I've been in a pickle before. So, but that's just kind of the bumps and bruises. I don't think Craig and they can really keep up with that. I think it'd be difficult with their database, as many locations they have, to keep up with that. Now,
yeah, because if it's like the example Cordelia you gave, if there's a moratorium, you know, those are put in place and then they're lifted, and you know, our files are so vast that that information, somebody would need to continuously update that. By the time one of our clients finds that city street,
right,
whatever's in there about a moratorium may not be the case anymore, and we don't want to scare them off. So,
well, the only thing I was saying is moratorium because we have a set moratorium in that area that's not going to go anywhere because it was signed in from the mayor. So I was just wondering, do little notes like that go on, like when people are scouting and looking for pictures? But
I mean, if it's more of a permanent thing, you know, maybe that's a note we'd want to put in there, you know, like the examples I gave in these small towns of having these noisy train tracks or being on a flight path. I mean, that's going to be a constant.
right.
I think it's more of the things that come and go that we may not want to include in the notes because it may be different by the time we get to those photos.
Okay.
I just want to say, if we have a sensitive location, we don't even include it most of the time in packages. If we know that there is a time block on something, or a location got burnt by a show and needs some space to breathe, like I just won't even pitch it to a potential show because I know it's not worth the hassle. And then as the rapport with the location manager builds, then you could say, well, there is this one location, but they're probably not going to say yes. It's sensitive. There's these X, Y, and Z restrictions. And again, it's like, how much money do you want to spend is what it comes down to. For initial pitches though, why bother? Why give them something that they can't have?
Correct. Okay.
All right. Well, that's my walk and talk.
All right. Thanks, Mark. So Andy, are you, wow, what just happened?
I'm getting off the share.
Oh, okay.
No new share.
Andy, are you ready to hop on?
Yes.
Okay. So just to remind everyone, Andy is from Savannah, and he's going to walk through some of his photography work. And, you know, Andy does a lot of natural locations. I mean, he does everything, but down in the Savannah area, does a lot of beaches, does a lot of swamps, things like that. And so he was one of the first folks I thought of when I wanted to get into that. When we've looked at a lot of buildings and town streets and things, but sometimes you may be asked to go find forests and swamps and more natural locations. And Andy, I thought, would be a good person to guide us through that, in addition to whatever else he wants to show us. So Andy, you're up.
All right. No, it was great to see Mark's pictures, and I love the format of the pan of the two pictures side by side. And you know, you notice these are scouting pictures. They don't need to be perfect. So, you know, having a little bit of a fuzziness between frames is not a huge deal. I wanted to talk a little bit first about someone had asked ahead of time about, shooting, what kind of camera you need to shoot with, and there's this, they talk about lenses in relation to how wide they are. So I wanted to show the difference between a couple different lenses. And I know people don't use different lenses. They tend to have a zoom that has different settings for widths on them. And as Mark's picture showed, wide is better than long. So if you're shooting more down at the sort of wider end of your range, you get a better sense of a place, whether that's outside or inside. And the iPhones, I have an iPhone 8, so it shoots with what they call a 28 millimeter equivalent. So this is how wide an iPhone 8 shoots, which I think is pretty good. And I think that the pano setting on the iPhone is pretty terrific too. But as Mark said, you can't go too wide with it. But the idea of seeing a horizontal strip of a place is powerful in showing what that place looks like. But real quickly, I wanted to show maybe what was too wide or too long for an interior. This is a 16 millimeter lens, and so you can see a lot. Things start to get a little weird when you go too wide. This is 24. That's not too bad. I sort of default to 24 on just about everything. I keep it on the camera all the time. You get some distortion, but it has a good field of view. 28, which is, 28, which is what the iPhone shoots. That's the equivalent on the iPhone, which I think is pretty terrific. This is what used to be known as a normal lens of 50 or 55, which it doesn't give you a good sense of a room. You sort of get a little bit of a detail of it, which is not necessarily appropriate. Here's looking the other way. That's sorry. This is the room from the other way. There's a long lens. I had my camera on a tripod and I just switched out the lenses, kind of doing it the hard way. I think normally people have zoom lenses that you could go wide. Here's 28, which I think is almost perfect. Shows a lot of the room without too much distortion. 24. I don't mean to get too technical on this. Okay, moving on. As Craig said, I kind of have a foot in both worlds. I do most of my work with the Savannah Regional Film Commission, and then I will also shoot on projects like Mark does, hired as a scout. And so Craig was talking about there's sort of a difference between shooting kind of general images of your county or town to try and generate interest, or something more specific, if somebody's looking for a specific factory or even a specific view. I wanted to talk a little bit about getting up off the ground, especially for outdoor photos. So this is the South Beach of Tybee. And you don't need to have a drone to shoot landscapes, but I've been using a drone in my scouting pictures because I think it often feature films or TV shows are sort of introduced. A location is introduced with an establishing shot, which is often from the air. So the drone is kind of a pretty cost-effective way to show the potential for an establishing shot. So this is South Beach of Tybee from the ground. And there's the pan. Of course, it's not perfect, but it doesn't matter. It's just giving a person a sense. And so this, I was on, I think I was on they have these beach stands. So just getting up a little bit off the ground, even if it's 6 feet, I think makes all the difference in photographing landscape or exteriors. The south end of Tybee has been very popular. specifically these homes at the south end. We had a Hallmark show called The Beach House, and often with a TV show or feature, it's a specific house that gets them to an area. They will come to a place to film because of one house, if everything's right. And the Beach House had these real specific requirements, and they wanted a house that looked like it was isolated. And so here, Tybie's very sort of dense with houses. It's a popular place. And it's hard to isolate a house or to make it look like it's the only house on the beach. There's certain things you can do, look for angles where trees are blocking other houses. And this particular Hallmark film, The Beach House, we kind of sold them on this house here, which it's sort of socked in with a lot of traffic. There's a lot of houses. I was able to show them that it could sort of look like it was on its own with photographs, not particularly these photographs. Let me see. Bear with me a sec. Sorry. So we at the film office use Real Scout, as I guess the camera ready folks are set up with that.
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
And so this is the Reeve house. That this house, being able to show this house isolated, was sort of made the difference of whether they came here, to shoot this place. So I was able to show that this house could, and this is it here on the south end of Tybee, that this could be seen or sort of made to look like there. This is the picture that made it look like it was the only house on the beach. So that's the kind of thing that sometimes you're asked to do to make a fiction or to make a place look like somewhere else. So that was a sort of a small victory for our office.
And Andy, we went over this, I believe, privately, but that shot you had of the house just now with the older roof, it's the same house before did they have a new roof put on the house?
No, the roof looked good, and then one of the storms came by and took it off. And they were looking for, when they were in post, they didn't feel like they had enough sort of establishing shot video of it. And so I'm not really a video guy, but I did try and shoot some footage. They ended up using something else, but yeah, it was surprisingly, they didn't get enough coverage when they were here. This has been a popular spot for, it's sort of an empty dock that gets shot. And again, I don't want to, the drone stuff can get kind of gimmicky. Not everything needs to be shot of the air, but for certain things, house at the edge of the water, I think it's sort of a powerful tool to show the scale of something and where it sits in the landscape. And of course, the potential for establishing shot. So a few things I've shot in here. This is the Skidaway Institute dock that doesn't get used that much, so it's available. I'm just run through how I shoot it, just sort of the coverage that I get. And I tend to shoot more than less. I mean, I shoot a lot, and we send a lot, and so you don't want to shoot redundant pictures, but I almost feel like you can't shoot too many. because you know it'll never fail. There'll be some view. Somebody will say, "Oh, why didn't you shoot it from the land looking towards the towards the dock?" And I think you know details are also an important thing. You know, shooting wide, and a detail here or there, you know, not to dwell on it, can also help. But you're just trying to describe the place in pictures. Again, this is I think this is sort of this is a two pan, and you know you see the seam here, but it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't need to be perfect. We're just trying to show the scope of the thing, how big it is. It's pretty wide. You could almost land a little plane on it. Okay, there's that. I'm trying to think of the questions, Craig. Was there anything that we didn't quite cover in the?
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up, because I know you've scouted a lot of natural locations like Little Tybee and the swamps, yes, and the beaches and things like that, and it seems like a no-brainer, but you know, one thing we tell people when they're considering locations to submit to our database for us to put out to our clients is how easily accessible they are for a crew.
Sure.
Because if it's something that's going to take, you're going to have to do a 3-mile hike through the woods to get to this beautiful angle you've shot. You know, you got to picture a crew with cabling and equipment and everything else doing that same walk. So it helps for there to be accessibility. You know, roads and parking and things like that.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes you know, in some ways, some, you know, producer or location manager might have seen pictures of Little Tybee somewhere. In some ways, you sort of have to show them things that don't work. So Little Tybee is very close to Tybee Island. You know, it's just like a half mile, but, you know, logistically, it's tricky. And, and then it's sort of a complicated thing to sort of show in pictures. So, you know, a small production could make it work, but this would be a tall order to get a movie crew here.
Yeah. I mean, we went through that with, as you know, Andy, with Anchorman 2. For those of you that saw the movie, that there's a lighthouse scene in it, kind of the silly lighthouse scene. And Andy knows we went up and down the coast with the director looking for lighthouses. And, you know, I tried to tell him in advance that, you know, because he wanted to go out to Sapelo. And I said, yeah, I'm happy to take you there. You just got to know that there's not a road going out there from the mainland. It's only by ferry. And it's those kind of things that I like to tell them in advance to be prepared. Because sometimes they see, like I know a lot of our camera ready folks and others have submitted photos that have been shot for tourism purposes or brochures or things like that. And there's not more information about, you know, like the things we're talking about today, what's around it, how accessible it is, that kind of those specific questions for our industry. So,
sure.
So we do have to think that way when we're considering what locations to promote, how accessible they are.
Right. And in some ways, you know, you could also be showing them that there's no reason to go to all the trouble to go to Sapelo to get this look when you could really get it on one of the barrier islands that you could drive to, St. Simons, Jekyll, or Tybee. It's sort of, you know, this idea of an island is romanticized, but not always so practical.
Yeah, and another example that's not from your area, but if everybody saw Walk in the Woods when they shot here, I mean that was the perfect example of, you know, it was Nick Nolte and who else was in that movie? So help me.
Robert Redford.
Robert Redford. I should have known that. But you know, they were supposed to be on the Appalachian Trail, and they were, you know, in reality, they were just hiking a short distance from the trailers out at a state park somewhere. But in the movie, you know, they faked it so it looks like they were in the middle of wilderness.
Yeah, and as far as roads go, I think one of the few times that I use a sort of a long lens or a long view as a road, and it shows, you know, the sort of the thing going off in the distance. I liked Mark's pictures of the roads. They're wonderful. winding roads. But, you know, normally I think that you should try and shoot wide rather than long, but for roads is one of those sort of exceptions. This is a beautiful road, Cay Creek Road, Liberty County. So I think this is the most beautiful road on the coast. And
Andy, one of the questions you asked about questions that came in, I think you had a story about this. Somebody had asked about your most challenging location scout request and how you fulfilled it. And I know you had a story, maybe Mark has one, but just, you know, one of those kind of challenging oddball requests that you've gotten.
Well, I mean,
I think it was Live by Night or something you were going to talk about.
Oh gosh, you know, I'm drawing a blank. Live by Night was interested in, they wanted what they called a speakeasy on the river. And, you know, the show was set in the 20s. The scouting for it went on for years. It was on again, off again. I scouted off and on for it for 3 years. And so the Georgia coast is 100 miles long. And I did cover a bit of that looking for just an old structure on the coast, you know, that you could pull a boat up to that could be dressed like a 20s speakeasy. And I saw a lot. It was hard to find anything that was kind of, you know, stable enough to have a crew in. Let me see. The one place they liked, I don't know if they ended up using it in the show, was this little town called Valona. And this property kind of held some interest for them. It's just a dock. And I believe they were going to use this building or they were going to add to it as a speakeasy. But this was literally 3 years of combing the coast looking for some kind of building that could, they had gone on so long that the business actually changed, and it went from $100 million show to something much less. But I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add. And I'm happy, you know, if anybody has any questions after this, I'm happy to answer any questions. I use the drone a lot in my scouting. You know, it's sort of overkill in some ways. I don't know that people are expecting it, but you know, we sort of strive to show the best pictures that we can. You know, and ultimately, from a film office or camera ready liaison perspective, it's one of the most exciting parts of my job in that regard is, you know, you get a request for something and you go out and take pictures. And, you know, you email them to them, and suddenly people from, you know, filmmakers from New York or LA are on a plane the next day to come see it. That's about the most rewarding thing in my job. That, you know, if done right, this job, you're getting people coming to your area to possibly film. And so that's always a kick for me. And, you know, ultimately, and if you can lure a show here, of course, that's the ultimate payoff.
Andy, can and Mark can jump in too. I know that one of the questions we had, and I thought it'd be an interesting topic, is when the times that you felt like you needed to engage outside agencies for location assistance. Like, for example, we in the office get a lot of questions about farms and crops, and, you know, I'm looking for this farmhouse that's growing this particular crop at this time of year.
Sure.
And I know that, you know, for example, there are county extension agents we can turn to, folks that are experts on architecture or history. You know, it's impossible to be the expert on everything. So we want to turn to these outside groups that are the real experts. So Mark, do you have any thoughts, like when the types of groups you've engaged in for specific or engaged with?
Well, two. The cave I saw you, we needed a cave for whatever the show was, it was a television show. And the known caves basically have bats in them, and bats have viruses. And so, and the bats also have a virus that's killing the bats. So they wouldn't let us in any of the known caves. And so I went to a geologist, and the geologist says, "Oh, do you know about the Cement, Georgia cave?" So that was a big hit for me. We used that cave a bunch. And the other thing was on Hunger Games. We were looking for the biggest stand of trees in Georgia, the tallest trees. Well, unfortunately, Georgia's canopy is about 80 feet. Really can't find anything taller than 80 feet. But I went to the Forestry Service, and they hooked me up with a guy down in Middle Georgia who took me to his tree farm, which is a massive tree farm. We ended up not using it, but usually it's more so like that. It's either camera ready or, as you say, some type of state agency to inquire to.
Yeah, I've had good luck with the county extension agents. So Chatham County is not very agricultural. And so in searching for farms or fields, I've reached out to the surrounding county extension agents, and I believe every county has one. This is part of the UGA system, and it's a system by which they all sort of share information about crop pests and problems with crops, or they can prevent and by sharing information. Anyway, the extension agents usually have a good line on they know the farms in their county, they know the barns or the perfect cotton field. So crops, this question of crops comes up a lot, with all the sort of Civil War or slavery era shows. People want cotton. When does cotton grow? Cornfields, when can we expect corn to be there? When are things green?
Yeah, and sometimes they want to replace whatever crop is there with the crop that they might find the perfect farmhouse, but they're growing some other crop. And I say, well, what would it take for us to pay them to plant this instead of what they normally plant? Those kind of questions.
There's a wonderful sort of architectural aficionado named Brian Brown, who has a couple of websites, I think Vanishing Georgia, Vanishing North Georgia, and Vanishing South Georgia. And he breaks it down by county, and everyone sort of sees old houses on roads that, you can drive by them, but he's got a pretty good line on things that are, back in somebody's property, and he's got a good sensibility he has a reverence for old buildings. And so he's a great resource for looking for, you can sort of search by your county in his database. You can see what pictures that he's posted. Brian Brown, Vanishing Georgia.
Yeah, and when you're thinking about in your community who you could engage with, there are also local historians and architecture experts probably that of in your community. We use Georgia Trust. There's several books. I mean, sometimes it's not as often as it used to be, but sometimes we get very specific architecture requirements or requests, which test my knowledge of home architecture. We do our best, but sometimes we just can't drill down to the specifics of what they need. So that's when it's good to have these folks in your Rolodex to call on if necessary. And we do it all the time.
Yeah, no, that reminds me, sometimes you'll get asked to find sort of specific architectural styles, and there's this book that I like that I've sort of used for a while, this Field Guide to American Houses by Virginia and Lee McAllister. It's sort of the Bible on architectural styles. Depending on the sort of sophistication of a production designer, people can talk about architecture and what they're looking for in real specifics. And Georgia does have a wealth of different styles, so it's good to be able to know if somebody says they want something specific, what they're looking for and how that relates to your own area, what's there. So I can't recommend this book enough. It's really good. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think I've got a copy of that too.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure before we start heading toward the end that I went back to, and I know this is important for our office because the number of images that someone submits to us per location, you know, we do want it to be manageable. One of the, as many of you know, one of the features in Real Scout is that you can tag a location with multiple keywords. And if you submit a location with 100 images in it and you've put some keyword and we're searching for that keyword, we're not going to know why this location is popping up without going into the files and going through picture after picture after picture. And you know, that gets to be labor intensive when we've got a big file pull request. So it is a good idea to try to keep it manageable, usually per location about, I think, Mark, you agreed with me, that's probably around 20 images are good. That's a good number.
Yep.
And did we talk about the file size per, I mean, we don't need high res print quality photos put in our system because everyone's looking at it online, and there is a file limit to, I think it's on our page, we've said it's about a maximum 10 megabytes per image or something like that.
Yeah, location manager can deal with smaller images than that. So, I mean, I just using mail, they have like 3 sizes: small, medium, and large. Basically, a medium image is good for me. Works for me.
Andy, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Since you work with Real Scout all the time.
No, yeah, I know in the office we have plenty fast internet, but at home I'm sort of struggling putting pictures on Real Scout. I found a sort of a sweet spot for our Real Scout posts. I usually post pictures, maybe they're 24 inches on the long side, and then whatever the height is, at 144 dots per inch, which is sort of, I'm kind of splitting the difference between screen resolution and print. So they're a little better than they need to be. And if somebody wanted to print them, they could, but they're not too cumbersome to email. You know, everything's a trade-off. They certainly could be smaller. I do think that medium, like on the iPhone, when you're sharing an iPhone picture, that sort of medium resolution is a sweet spot.
Andy, are you going to show us something else, or should I keep asking? Because we're getting toward the end of the
yeah,
questions.
no, I don't know that I have anything else that I need.
Well, I
to
know
show.
that a lot of our one of the most popular questions I always get is what our liaisons can be doing to help you. I would say both when you're actively scouting, like, do you need them to help set appointments for you, help with you know, contacting some of the property owners? What can they do to help you when you're scouting? And also what can they do right now while we're all kind of sitting at home? And I would say one of my answers to that is, and I always preach this, is to make sure that you look through the location files every once in a while and see if they're still, if the locations are still good for us to promote. You know, if they're still standing, or if they're still film friendly, or whatever. If there have been any drastic changes, we need to know. To periodically kind of look through the files. That's very helpful to us because we're obviously not going to know the current status of every location in the state. But Mark and Andy, do you have any thoughts on either while you're scouting or what they can do now?
I think you're correct about saying make sure your files are somewhat current. As far as when we're out looking, if you have something we'd like to see and you have made the introduction to that location, we would like for you to be there, especially if it's a power plant or some, you know, it's nice to have a government representative with us at least on our first visit. So I would encourage that greatly. I think that's a great thing.
Andy, do you have any thoughts on that? Or do you concur?
I concur.
Okay. I may have gone through just about, so this is my warning. If anybody has questions, send me a message so I can call on you.
You want to talk about the zone a little bit, the zones?
Sure. What is it?
So
Tell us what it is.
So Atlanta has what they call a zone. It's union rules is what it is. And basically, it's 30 miles from wherever the production office is. So if our production office is in Macon, it's 30 miles outside of Macon, or if it's in Atlanta, it's basically 30 miles outside of Atlanta. But because after you go that 30 miles, you have to begin paying the crew travel time. You have to give them mileage, and they go on the clock. So if you're an hour and a half out of Atlanta, you're paying the crew an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening back and forth. That also, we have a 12-hour day. That means you're cutting an hour off your filming day on each end. So you're down to a 10-hour day. So that's what keeps us from going too far from Atlanta. But we will go outside the 30 miles, basically up to about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, if there's a location we like. And that would be the same, I guess, in South Georgia too. We're in one of the South Georgia cities or towns. We would try to find locations within about 30 miles of that so we don't lose filming time during the day. It's called the zone.
Yeah, and I know with us, we are seeing more and more that productions are willing to travel to get that unique spot that that may not be in one of these zones, and that they'll travel and they'll bring people if it's unique enough. And that's why it's important to really sell what's the further away you are from the film centers, what you have that's truly unique and would attract a production. And even if it's not for the full production, maybe it's for a few days, but it's still economic impact for your community. So that's a important thing. Andy, did we want to talk about the Savannah specific story you and I talked about? I don't know if Beth is still on here, but
She is.
we had talked about how Gemini Man made that work down that way.
Beth, you want to take that on?
Sure. You know, what we consider our zone, what we scout, what we look for is 60 miles from City Hall in Savannah, because we found that just gives us such a diverse look, and we can keep those locations available so there are options that you may not have closer to our area. Well, Glenville is one of those communities that's kind of right on that border of the 60 miles, but it provided so much that they were looking for that it was worth making the trek there. So they did. Benefited the city so much, the little town of Glenville. They ended up putting some of their crew that were like locations that were there for a good bit of time in Hinesville, which is closer to Glenville, putting them up while they were there to cut down on that travel time. So.
I'm sorry, I didn't do a proper introduction. That's Beth Nelson's the director of the Savannah Regional Film Commission.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was winging it. Yeah, so, and I know that town was very important, and you know, they got a lot of bang for their buck with that crew there. I mean, it really was something that worked out well for them.
Yeah, you find that those people are so much more cooperative and eager to have productions there because they don't get so much. And I think the other thing, if you are in that area, is to know what you have available for maybe a temporary production office space. Is there any housing options? Just any kind of things you can put together. What kind of infrastructure and support services are there? And be creative and look outside of the box. Maybe they're just there for a few days, but knowing that you can use a school cafeteria for catering or all of that stuff is very helpful.
Yeah, and another example, not in Atlanta or Savannah, because I see Joe is still on the call. You know, one of my first projects at the film office was Sweet Home, Alabama, and they used Crawfordville, and we drove all over the state looking for that town. And it was a little different time then, but you know, this was you know, before the big boom, and you know, we were kind of on our last. We were about to lose the project because we hadn't found the right town for them, and we drove them through Crawfordville, and that's what really got them excited, and that was at the very end. But they made it happen. They made it work, shooting there, and that was a pretty substantial amount of filming. So So it's definitely doable. All right, so Lee Cuthbert has a question from our office. Lee, do you want to unmute
Yeah,
yourself
good morning.
and ask?
That was super helpful. My question is for Mark and for Andy, just about how often you go back and you do a little extra processing on your photos, whether or not it's adjusting some sizes or contrast, and what program you use to do that.
I use Photos, Apple's Photo. It comes with the computer, and I'll just get it up for you and show you a few things that it does. Once it takes a minute to open. But you can, a lot of times you'll go in a house and it'll be heavily shaded. You'll have hot windows that have a lot of light coming through them. And so your pictures are pretty dark. And like I said, once it comes up on my computer, I'll show you how you can adjust, how you can level your pictures where they're not all, uneven and crooked. And, but those are the two main ones I use. It's just my computer's pretty old, so it's just taking a minute for it to open up. But Andy?
Yeah, I tend to manipulate almost everything I shoot, sharpen it, even it out. Maybe I have my camera set to shoot sort of flat color, so I'll punch the color up a little. But you're not trying to create a fiction. You're not, these aren't tourism pictures. You're trying to be as honest as you can. But I always find that I can make the pictures better in some way, and so I do maybe spend almost as much time with pictures afterwards as I did in shooting them in the first place. But
that's helpful, yeah, because I find sometimes the sun just isn't where you want it to be, and so you got to do a little manipulation on the back end. And I've been using an old version of Photoshop, and just wondered if there was if you had any special secret tips.
Photoshop does a lot more than you need it to do. I think in dealing with digital images, mostly it's just about the size, brightness and contrast, color balance. If you're really kind of getting down to it, Photoshop does way more than you need to. One of the things I found real helpful with Photoshop, and I'm sure Mark's program has this, sometimes you have to pick between the exposure, whether for the highlight or the shadow, and Photoshop has this shadow highlight filter where you can take the highlights down a little or bring things out of the shadows, it makes it very forgiving when you miss the exposure in the field, and as I often do.
So on the screen now is the Apple Photo, and it's very simple to use. So I've picked an image that's fairly dark, and hopefully I hadn't already adjusted it, but you just go to edit. It has these different little prompts. So this is how I can adjust the shadows. Just grab it here and just pull it over. And now I can have a better idea what's in that tunnel. And the other neat little thing, because many times your images aren't very level, is that this little image, you can level it up. A lot of scouts don't go to that trouble, but a manager needs to have images that look pretty good. Otherwise, it reflects badly on the manager. So.
Yeah, and in this day and age, everyone's got a camera. You learn a lot by seeing how people shoot pictures. So I mean, you could go through Real Scout and look at files, and you can learn a lot about how things are shot that way. I mean, I've seen people scouting in such a sort of slap happy way where they're literally driving around and not even slow the car down and just sort of shoot out the window, and it shows. So it does pay to sort of take time and get good pictures. You're dealing with folks, Hollywood folks or movie folks. You're dealing with people who are really visually sophisticated, so it does help to kind of put your best foot forward as far as the pictures you're sending off. These are the things that get people on planes and coming to your town.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions while we got these guys here? I think I've asked just about everything that you sent to me.
Yeah, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Like the image we see of you in the background there, it has something Georgia. Copyright and protection of the image, you know, we've seen a lot of fantastic images today that are available on Real Scout. It looked like the other Smug Mug thing was a purchase. You had to purchase it. But people rip off those images, and should you copyright them, or should you put a watermark on them, or don't you worry about that sort of thing?
We can password our files. I have a ton of homes on there, and it's normally passworded to be able to access them. So, but people still have a lot of scouts, and they do borrow my files, but that's just kind of part of the game. But I will use other managers' images sometime. And like I said, I do pull things off Google, but I think just since we're just sharing them in house, I don't know if there's really too much trouble we can get in. Maybe we can, but hopefully I won't, you know, I'm unsure of that. But we're not using the image for any kind of material gain as far as selling the image or using it in a movie or something like that.
Yeah. And
with us,
when you're using the drone, you're a drone pilot, or did you have to go and get certified as a commercial drone operator, or can you just be a local folk with your?
You know, I did go to the trouble. It's sort of a gray area, I think, with, you know, if you're, I know a lot of folks use them for real estate, and but I don't know that, you know, if you were I don't know that necessarily they're looking to bother camera ready folks in Georgia counties who are, you know, would just take a drone up to get a quick shot of something they want to show from a different perspective. It's definitely sort of a gray area in the law, but I think the key is when it starts to become commercial use. And I did go to the trouble of getting certification when I, you know, was getting hired on shows specifically. But I think for this kind of government or municipal work, it's not so necessary. And they're cheap. They've come down in price a lot. They're very sophisticated. You don't have to be a pilot to use them.
And Joe, to get back to the legal question or copyright question, you know, with us, because a lot of our locations are submitted by the public now, because we have that public link. We do have a bit of legalese that they have to agree to submit the photos, that they have the authority to do so, basically, and we're not violating anybody's copyright to publish them.
There's also a way to credit if you have outside photographers. So like we use some of our scouts photos that they share with us. And in Real Scout, there's actually a place where you can credit the photographer. So they basically let us use those photos so long as they have the credit for it. And we usually just, when we get inquiries about it, we kick it to that scout because they shared those photos.
That's a good question. Anybody else have anything for Andy or Mark or me while we're here?
Hey, LaShawn Cook here, City of Atlanta.
Hey, LaShawn.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
We have some properties that are represented by locations companies, right? I know, Craig, you sent out a list of just kind of updated files that we should kind of rescout. Terminus happens to be one. It's been recently represented by a local location company here in the city. How do we go about that? Do you still want those uploaded to the site? And then if, I guess as a location manager, Mark, if you guys can kind of discuss, how do you go about that process when it comes to location scouting and selecting a location for the production?
There's more and more, especially commercial locations that are being represented by different companies that'll open the door for us, but also they make the deals, and they're usually more expensive. But it's if we walk in the door and knock on the manager's door and he's willing to show us the property, and and doesn't want to involve their location company, that's great. But if I do get a location company involved, that's just part of the game now. I prefer not to. They're great to have when you're struggling to find what you want, and they have some beautiful things. And I use them frequently. So it's a little two-sided knife sword there, or whatever. It's great if they have access to those places, and they do make it a bit easier for you dealing with the management company because they're in the middle. Things get difficult sometimes. But I don't see why you wouldn't load them to the site unless Craig has some opposition to that.
We've had many discussions about this in the office, and maybe Lee Cuthbert and Mary Ann want to chime in too. They're welcome to, but there's a noticeable increase in these location services companies they're basically, for those that don't know, they're like agencies for locations, and they have various levels of command over the location. They could do everything from just find it and charge a commission to handling contracts to having a site rep. I mean, different companies offer different things. But we've just had, one of the things we were trying to avoid is our database just being an additional tool for some of these companies that already have their own databases. And so we've been trying to work through that. I mean, and again, I'm happy for my colleagues to chime in, but one of the things you mentioned, LaShawn, the Terminus building, that's one of those unique locations that if there's no other option but to talk to an agency, maybe we would include it. But when you get into like specifically or especially people's houses, we had a company, they'll go nameless here, but we had a company that scraped our database and sent an e-blast out to everyone that was in our Real Scout saying they wanted to rep our property, and they wrote the email in a way that made it seem like they were partners with us. And, we had more than a few that were angry about it, and we knew we had we had nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
so that's what. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I was just going to note, just for your reassurance, you can't actually scrape Real Scout. They sent one email at a time. And we've since gone back and just made emails private. We were offering them publicly as a service, and then when that happened, we turned them off. But you can't just go through and grab all 8,000 locations and send an email blast through Real Scout.
Okay, thanks for that. But they try.
They try.
And I know that and that's how, I've gotten emails recently. Now you're the camera ready email addresses. That is something they could get pretty easily because that's just an Excel spreadsheet that they can download and grab all your addresses. So that's how a lot of you still receive these emails from location service companies and folks like that. So, I mean, Lee, do you have any thoughts about, do you agree with what I said about unique buildings versus things like houses, or how we walk that line? I mean, that's kind of how I think of it. But
no, we've had a lot of conversations in our office about it. And, for companies, yes, what Craig said is true. If somebody has taken somebody's property and has their own website and they're repping it, and then they want to go back and put it in our database, we're not there to be a revenue generator for them. We're not in the business of marketing their properties, and what we do is a business-to-business service. And there's just a feeling that duplication of efforts is not what this database is all about. But we are there to serve the filmmaker, and if there's something that they need to see, like the Terminus building, I mean, my personal thing would be, yes, let's put it in. And there are some things like that, like the American Cancer Society headquarters, which South Scout reps. I mean, it's a fantastic, unique property, and our database wouldn't be as good if it wasn't in it.
But the flip side for the manager is that, let's say without a location company repping, it might be $5,000 for a couple days work, or probably a little more than that. But if apples to oranges, when that location service comes in, the property might go to $12,000.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Location-wise in Atlanta, everything's gotten very expensive. And the more these location companies grow, the more expensive the city becomes.
And that's what the property owner has to debate about. You know, some of these properties don't want to show anything to a show that doesn't have $20,000 to use it. They don't even want to, you know, allow you to scout it. So for them, it's a barrier to entry that they like to have.
Sure. And talking to folks in the business in Louisiana, New Orleans, the convention is special houses are repped by someone, and you know, they're almost like a realtor who sort of steps in and gets a percentage. And ultimately, the incentive for the rep is to have the price go up because they get a percentage of it. So I don't know, somehow in Savannah, we've managed to avoid a lot of this because it does drive the price up and makes it harder for folks to film. And it can sort of artificially just drive a location fee way up past appropriate. That's my take on it.
Yeah. And you know, when we get into costs, you know, that's another thing we can put in the notes in Real Scout. I mean, if we have it's not common, but if we have property owners that say, you know, or entities that say the location is this amount, I'm not going to budge from it, we may put that in the notes for our knowledge, because if we have an indie filmmaker that we know can't afford it and it's not even going to be a discussion, we'll try to steer them away from that.
So, Craig, so you've had the pictures, you've sent them to somebody, they're interested, they come, say, we like this, but you have 3 or 4 property owners, say like our town in Tolliver County. How do you, or do we get involved with the negotiation, or how does the fee get set? You know, you're talking $5,000, $20,000 for a building. We're talking about a whole town of people that, you know, the places are falling down. How do you get involved? Do we get involved in that? Do you get involved in that? Or does the filmmaker have to deal with each individual property owner?
We don't deal with it, and you probably wouldn't either, but that's a great question for Mark and Andy, I think, because they can tell you how they negotiate that.
But I mean, I don't have a clue to what to tell the property owners, whether it's an individual house or the whole town. You know, we've had a couple requests. In fact, a Marvel location, I guess, manager from California wanted to do the whole town, and she starts telling, well, we'll pay this much for over their revenues or something, but we don't have any revenues. So I don't, you know, and I didn't even know what to say to her from that aspect.
I would do this. I would, for individual property, you really shouldn't be involved. I don't think there's any reason to do that. You might find out what the offer is, and if you have a bit of knowledge, you might say that's a little high, or you got a little low, or you got a good deal. But when you're talking about a town, the only thing, it'd be good to have a representative to bring the people together so that we can talk to them. If there's some guy that owns 6 properties on Main Street, and, you know, and the other 5 or 6 are individually owned, you could facilitate us meeting with these people. But I think you're going to get yourself in trouble if you start trying to negotiate. I think that's a very sticky wicket.
Yeah, for the most part, there's, even though I kind of mentioned that in my previous comments, there's not a set rate for locations. It depends on variables like what their location budget is and what it is that they want to do and how long they're going to be there. And it's hard, you know, we get asked all the time from property owners and shop owners, how much should I charge? And it varies, as I'm sure Mark and Andy could tell you.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I could ask this a lot, and you know, at the film office, from that perspective, we stay away from these conversations. It's just not appropriate. But you know, I advise people to, you know, in Savannah, you talk to folks who've set a precedent, you know, and it definitely depends on the scope of the work. You know, there's a difference between shooting outside the house or just having a person go in the front door to taking over the whole house, and you're going to be in a hotel for 2 weeks. And I just advise them to talk to somebody else who's been through it. And in Savannah, there's a lot of examples. And as far as taking over a town, yeah, I might try and approach someplace like Glenville or some other small town and ask how they deal with it, because, you know, you're dealing with a lot of variables on the scope of use of police, businesses closing, or, you know, what it would cost the town itself for this work, and the inconvenience and the extra staff. I think that's a sort of a handy way to kind of sidestep issues of, or questions about money, get them to talk to somebody who's been through it.
And also it's the scale of the movie, whether it's a $5 million movie
Sure.
or a $55 million movie. It's going to, if the $5 million movie is not going to be able to, it's not going to have as much money as a, you know, a larger film. So it's all a negotiation. Wade into it.
Is there a, is, you know, the studio has a location manager that they're working with. Is there like a, I mean, is Mark, are you like, could you be, or is there a Georgia, the other side location manager who would negotiate all that or work all that out for us, for a town, or for a, you know, a particular movie?
I would be, there is not. And I would be hesitant to do it on a scale of a town, but I don't mind if I know someone, they call me on the phone and said, Mark, these guys are looking, you know, what's the rate? What do you think it is? And I'll give them a fair price. I won't, but at the same time, you still got to weigh out those, you know, the measurements of how big the show is and how much money they have. And you know, every show's different, and every negotiation is a bit different. Sometimes you make a good deal where they're not killing us on the price, and sometimes you just get your head bashed in. You know, you would wish you'd never gone there. So it's tricky.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you, you know, people have long memories if they feel like they've been price gouged. I mean, you have to walk that line, and you want to make sure people are fairly compensated. But if they feel like they've been taken advantage of, you know, a reputation will be earned sometimes. Joe, did that answer your question?
Yeah, helpful. Thank you very much. It's been very informative. Really appreciate all the feedback.
So if before everybody goes, I don't know, I guess we don't have any more questions, but Alan, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay, so so everybody, I've sent out a couple of emails to you about this Georgia FilmWorks site that we have. And we are still, and Alan specifically, looking for stories to load into the site. And I wanted him to talk briefly with you about that and introduce himself. So I'm gonna let you take it away, Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Appreciate it. Guys, I'm working with Craig and folks in the film office. I think everyone's aware of the opportunity to tell great stories of the industry in every county in the state. And Craig sent you, I'm gonna share my screen if that's possible, so I can, let's see. If you go to the website, which is our kind of new story map website, which is georgia.org/filmworks. And if you scroll down here, there's an opportunity for many of you to submit your own stories of the success of the film industry in your own community. You're our eyes and ears on the ground, and you're hearing stories of, I think, businesses that are flourishing, either great production stories if there's a successful interaction with the production with a local business, or with involving members of the education community down in your area. We'd love to hear about that, you know, because we're showcasing stories from small businesses, Georgians. We've got the Film Academy campuses across the state. But here, right here, if you click here, we have a submission page, and you go to that, and you fill out the form, and it's just essentially your name, your email, a quick bullet point of the story. I'll probably get in touch with you once you submit it to kind of flesh it out about how we'll feature that. And then if there's a picture or a video that you have, we would really love to do that. And this is something that Lee and our team will be using throughout the year as we talk to policymakers, as we talk to communities, as our senior leadership goes around the state. We want to showcase great stories from all over the state including Metro, but also in South and North Georgia. So just if you get a minute over the next couple of weeks, take a look at that, take a look at the website, and kind of be thinking about, you know, interactions or contacts that you have that we think that we could promote from our website. And give me a ring or call. My email address is afox@georgia.org. Craig knows how to get in touch with me if we can help supply some of these stories. We really would love to get a story from every county in the state, ideally. So if you've got a great idea, send us our way. And thank you for all you do. Appreciate it, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Well, unless anyone has a burning question, I guess we're going to bring this meeting to a close. And I hope it's been informative and you've learned a lot. And I want to thank Mark and Andy for taking part in creating these presentations for us.
Thanks, Mark and Andy.
Thank you. This was great.
I'm happy to answer any questions at another time. ayoung@filmsavannah.org. Happy to help.
I am.
Thanks Lee and Craig for all you do for the film business. It's kind of become normalized. And many times we come to you with problems, you're able to solve. So thank you for that. And Craig, if you want to share my email and telephone number with our group, our listeners today, or I'm happy to, if questions come up in the next few days or in the future, I'm happy to respond to those.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for that. I'll email everybody Andy and Mark's information if you think of something that you didn't ask. But let me know.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Together.
Everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great weekend, everybody. Hey, Ann.
All right.
Hey,
Friday.
Molly.
Be safe.
All right, everybody be safe and healthy.
Y'all
See you
too. Wash
soon.
your hands.
Wash your hands.
Stay in.
Bye, everybody.